Every life is marked by pain, not always the loud kind, but often the quiet ache of passing years, of mornings that look too much like the last, of choices deferred until they dissolve into habit. People search endlessly for a way around it, as if comfort could shield them from the truth. Yet comfort has a cost of its own. What begins as safety slowly hardens into stillness. The same walls that protect you become the walls that confine you. Days grow predictable, and predictability turns heavy. A strange restlessness appears, neither sharp enough to break you, nor gentle enough to soothe you. It lingers, whispering that life is slipping through your fingers. And so, without ever making a dramatic decision, you find yourself already paying a price. This is the first pain, often the most overlooked, but perhaps the most dangerous of all, the pain of staying comfortable. Comfort is seductive. It drapes itself in familiarity, convincing us that repetition is a kind of safety. The same road to work, the same chair at the table, the same polite conversations that circle endlessly without ever touching the marrow of life. At first, this rhythm feels reassuring. No surprises, no sudden storms. Yet beneath the surface, something else quietly stirs, a fatigue that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. Psychologists have long observed that the human brain, while built to seek efficiency, withers without novelty. Neurons strengthen when challenged, but left unused, they dull. What feels like peace is often the slow erosion of vitality. Consider the man who remains in a job that demands little, but also offers little. Each day is bearable, yet each day takes more from him than it gives. Mondays arrive heavier, and Fridays no longer bring release, only the knowledge that another identical cycle waits ahead. No risk, no rejection, no visible battle. And yet the weight of unused potential presses harder than failure ever could. His body records it too. Studies note how monotony raises stress hormones, as if the system itself rebels against the absence of growth. What appears calm on the outside begins to rot silently within. This is the hidden tax of comfort. It lulls one into believing that stillness is harmless, when in truth it demands the steepest price of all: time. And time, once spent, never returns. The resentment that gathers in quiet corners of the heart is not sudden. It is the bill that comfort eventually delivers. Years dissolve into sameness, and the life not lived becomes its own ghost, haunting every routine. Yet there is a turning point hidden within this recognition. To see that comfort carries pain is already to loosen its grip. For once the illusion is broken, the mind begins to understand that there is no path free of struggle. One may choose the numbing ache of staying the same, or one may choose the sharper but fruitful burden of growth. Both demand something, but only one offers return. And here, another truth begins to surface. If the pain of comfort is decay, then its opposite is effort, the deliberate, often uncomfortable work that bends today into a different tomorrow. Which brings us to the second pain, the pain of effort. If this content is resonating with you, consider subscribing. I make videos that help you see the world and yourself more clearly. Thank you. Effort has never disguised itself as pleasant. It announces its presence in the burn of muscles, in the weight of early mornings, in the dull resistance of a mind that would rather postpone than persist. And yet, effort is the only pain that leaves visible traces of its labor. Where comfort erodes silently, effort builds in ways both subtle and profound. Neuroscience shows that every deliberate act of challenge rewires the brain. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Discipline leaves its mark not only on the body, but on the very architecture of thought. What feels like strain in the moment is, in truth, construction. Take the example of physical training. The body resists at first, heart racing, lungs straining, limbs trembling. On the surface, it is discomfort. But beneath, microscopic fibers tear and repair, a hidden alchemy by which weakness is slowly replaced with strength. The same principle applies to skills of the mind. Learning a new language, practicing an instrument, persisting through the early failures of any craft, all summon the same fatigue, the same temptation to retreat. Yet over time, the mind grows sharper, memory steadier, and confidence no longer borrowed but earned. This is the paradox of effort. It appears as loss in the present, but reveals itself as gain in the future. Skipping the struggle feels merciful now, but the body and mind pay interest later in diminished resilience, brittle health, and stagnant spirit. Effort, though painful, is one of the few investments where returns are guaranteed. Each repetition, each decision to rise again after falling, is a deposit toward a life less dictated by circumstance and more shaped by will. Still, effort alone is not enough. For every hour spent building, something else must be surrendered. Time that might have been given to leisure, energy that could have been spent in easier company, even relationships that resist the new direction. This is where the third pain makes itself known. The pain not of labor itself, but of what must be set aside for labor to endure. It is not the weight of what we lift, but the weight of what we leave behind. And so, beyond the pain of effort, one meets inevitably the pain of sacrifice. Sacrifice is the most misunderstood of the pains, for it often disguises itself as loss. To let go of something once cherished, to part with time, with comfort, with familiar company, these moments are felt as wounds. Yet beneath the surface, sacrifice carries a logic older than civilization itself. Nothing of value is ever born without something surrendered in its place. Even nature abides by this law. The forest renews itself only after fire clears the old growth. The body strengthens only when rest follows exertion. In the same way, a life reshapes itself through deliberate renunciations. Consider the act of saving money. On the surface, it feels like deprivation, meals skipped out, luxuries delayed, indulgences denied. But psychologists have observed that those who practice delayed gratification cultivate greater resilience over time. The marshmallow experiments of the 20th century, though simple in form, revealed this. The child who could wait often grew into the adult, better equipped to steer their destiny. What appeared as a denial of sweetness was, in fact, the rehearsal of freedom. The same truth reveals itself in relationships. To step away from bonds that no longer serve growth is to endure loneliness at first, but that absence becomes fertile ground for deeper connections later. Neuroscience has noted how social ties shape the brain. The company one keeps is not merely external, but imprinted in neural circuitry. To remain with destructive company is not neutral, it is to train the mind toward patterns of fear and stagnation. Thus, the courage to release such ties is not cruelty, but preservation, a sacrifice that protects the architecture of the self. Sacrifice, then, is not about loss, but about trade. It is the surrender of the immediate for the sake of the enduring. The hour of sleep exchanged for study, the fleeting pleasure exchanged for health, the fading friendship exchanged for authenticity. At first, the scales feel uneven, and grief lingers for what has been given up. But in time, the weight shifts, and what once felt like absence reveals itself as foundation. The truth is that every sacrifice builds a frame for transformation. Without it, change cannot hold. And this is the final, perhaps the hardest pain, the pain of transformation itself. For once the trades are made, The identity that once clung to them must dissolve, and something entirely new must take its place. Which leads us to the last and most demanding stage, the pain of transformation. Transformation is the rarest pain because it demands not only effort and sacrifice, but the surrender of identity itself. It is one thing to labor, another to let go, but quite another to watch the person one has been slowly dissolve into someone unfamiliar. Change does not arrive like a visitor at the door. It seeps into the bones, rearranges the language of thought, alters the very rhythm of how one stands in the world. To undergo transformation is to endure a quiet mourning, the grief of outgrowing the self once known. Psychology describes this as cognitive restructuring, the brain reshaping its pathways to accommodate new beliefs and behaviors. At first, the process feels unnatural, even threatening, as though one is betraying an older self. Studies on habit formation confirm this unease. Neural circuits resist, clinging to what has been rehearsed, and the unfamiliar registers almost as danger. Thus, transformation often feels less like progress and more like exile. Yet it is within this exile that the most profound liberation takes place. Consider the timid voice that once faltered in public. Each attempt to speak brings discomfort, the heart racing, the words tangled. But over months of persistence, the nervous system adapts. What once summoned fear now summons calm, and the individual no longer recognizes the earlier version of themselves. Transformation reveals itself not in a single victory, but in the moment one realizes they can no longer return to the smaller life once lived. The pain was not pointless. It was the crucible in which a new self was forged. Biologists speak of metamorphosis, the caterpillar dissolving into a formless state before becoming something unrecognizable. Human beings undergo similar passages, internal dissolutions that precede new beginnings. To resist this stage is to remain forever unfinished. To accept it is to become irreversibly changed. And unlike the pains that came before, the pain of transformation carries with it a strange beauty. It proves that growth is real, visible, and final. The truth, then, is that pain cannot be avoided, but within its many shapes lies choice. One can choose the dull ache of stagnation or the searing, fruitful discomfort of growth. And perhaps that choice, more than any external circumstance, is what determines the weight and worth of a life. So now a question remains, not as instruction but as invitation. When you reflect on your own path, which pain have you chosen most often? Share it if you feel compelled in the comments below. Not as confession, but as a way of giving shape to the journey we all endure in silence.